My name's Rob. I'm the CEO of Stealth Group, and with us we have Dasha, who's our president and resident geek. She's our panelist. We have Emmy, our marketing director. We've got Brent, our COO. We have Kayla, who's our operations director. We've got Jackie, who is, if anyone ever needs anything to do with Adobe products, if you guys have seen our marketing and some of the pictures that and diagrams that we put out, that's Jackie. So she's on the call. We have a panelist. So we have Rich, and Rich, I'm gonna give you some intro here. So you're a cyber risk and compliance strategist with over 20 years of business and operational leadership across a broad spectrum of industries. Your reputation rests on your ability to translate technical and tactical expertise into actionable perspectives on enterprise risk management. So welcome to the panel. Thank you for joining. You're the perfect panelist for us. Couple of rules of the game. So rule number one, there is no sales pitch on this call. This is hosted by us purely to share knowledge and insight, any tips and tricks. You know, we firmly believe that being compliant doesn't make you secure, and that's been a strapline for us, and we try and fill in the gaps for people. This is another kind of rule. This is a bit of a dry topic. We try to have a little bit of fun with it, and also to save it being less of a presentation and more of a conversation. If you don't mind switching your cameras on, it's not mandatory, but it's nice just to get a bit of reaction around the room, just to see who's on and see what's resonating and what's not. Next rule, the questions that folks have submitted and still continue to submit are on slido.com. That's slido.com. Use code 29911 to register your questions if you've got any, or you can pop something in the chat here. I'm sure we'll pick that up. So we do have a lot of questions. I've kind of resequenced them to make this them flow a little better, so I'll get into those in a second. But the reason why this is timely, Stealth were chosen as one of the first companies to join the assessment program. So Dasha, our resident geek and president, is on the course this week. She takes her exam next weekend. So your participation and your joining this is timely, because you're going to hear some very up-to-date nuggets of information that will be very useful. So one thing that I'd like to lead with, which was a soundbite from the course, from one of the trainers who shall be unnamed from the course. This is going to be more work than people expect. So looking at the requirements and what they're expecting people to do, I think companies are going to be a little surprised by the amount of effort that they have to give up. So without further ado then, let's get into the question. So question number one, I'm going to fire this to Dasha. So how does attaining CMMC certification actually work? What's the process?
So the process is going to be simple. So right now the CMMC board and DoD are still at the early stages, but based on what we've learned over the training course, is the DoD still plans to submit several RFPs, RFIs in next year, well, next fiscal year. So all the way to, from October all the way to the end. They're expecting at least 10 RFIs, RFPs to go out. And they are right now expecting that those companies, and there will be a CMMC requirement, that those companies need to be registered and CMMC compliant when they receive the contract. So not for bidding, that may change, but for now it's when you receive the contract, you need to be CMMC compliant. And what CMMC is working on, or CMMC board is working on right now, is on their website, as soon as the first class passes the exams next week, and we go through a background check and sign the NDAs and the clause of ethics and all that good stuff, there will be a list, and they will maintain that going forward, a list of assessors, individual assessors that have gone through the training and can do assessments. Then there's going to be a list of companies that are the assessment companies. And then eventually there's going to be the list of tools and services that are being provided by those companies that meet CMMC compliances. So basically, the first point will be to go to the website, identify the assessors, and that's going to be really the first step. Going forward, once the companies lists are out there, it's probably going to be the easiest to just go reach out to those companies, because the way it is set up, individuals as assessors cannot assess if they are not attached to a assessment company. So very similar to CMMC. So you will have to, once the list for the companies is out there, go straight to those companies, reach out to them, and they will walk you through the process of actually getting certified. And from the certification or the assessment and certification process, it's quite straightforward. The requirement is it needs to be done on site. There will be exceptions because of COVID, depending on how the situation looks like, but it will have to be on site. And the assessor, the whole process, how it works, there will be a planning phase that the assessment or assessor does with the client. Then there will be the on-site assessment itself. Then there will be the report that the assessor will create and submit to the C3PAO company, the certifier, or sorry, the certifying company, to actually review it, QA it, and that company will submit it to the CMMC board, and the CMMC board will review the information from the assessor, and they will issue the certificate. So the company or the assessor have nothing to do with the certification issue. That will come straight from the CMMC board based on the evidence that was provided. So that's the whole process for now.
Fantastic. You've answered one of the further questions, which was, who can I contact to discuss CMMC certification? Will there be a published list of companies? So yes.
Yes, there will be, but right now, so the way it works, the assessors need to be attached to a company, to an assessment company with CMMC to do assessments. So the CMMC board, how they're rolling it out right now is they get us assessors out the door. Once we go through the paperwork and pass the exam and everything, there will be an official announcement. And then the next step that they're doing is to get the companies certified and on that list. So then they have not given us the exact timeline. There's still a couple open questions that they need to get an answer from the DoD, but basically the response is as quickly as possible, because they understand that there is a need to get. Right now they're thinking approximately 800 companies that will need some kind of a certification assessment by the end of this year to meet or be able to submit proposals and meet the requirements that the DoD puts out in RFIs and RFPs.
Okay, so it sounds like if you pass the exam and you're not affiliated with a company that is a certified assessment company, then there might be a mad rush for your services.
Yeah, I mean, basically right now, considering that we're such a small team and there only will be 32 companies to go out the door that will be certified. So right now, the way we're doing it is we are teaming up. The ones that are a one-man show or not have a company associated with, we're all just going to work together to make this work. So we will be partnering, even as Stealth, we will be partnering with the ones that were on the training course with me and the ones that will come forward to make sure that everybody has what we call a home, a company home to do assessments against.
Okay, I mean, that's a nice segue into a couple of questions around the schedule and whether there is expected to be a bottleneck or not. So from my understanding is that DoD plans to put out at least 10 RFIs with CMMC requirements this year. Around 800 companies will be expected to need CMMC certification between now and the end of this year. But that's only at level 1 at this point. So, I mean, you can do the math with only 75 assessors, 32 companies certified. I would, do the math. That's a lot of work. So yes, there may well be a bottleneck. We're looking at the laws of supply and demand. What that's going to do to pricing, Lord only knows right now. But this is something that I put on LinkedIn. You know, whoever you decide to go with, you should really be thinking about doing it quickly, because, you know, if you run the risk of not being certified and therefore not being able to, you can bid on contracts as Dash has said, but if you win it and you're not certified, then you lose it at that point.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So, all right, we're doing well with the questions. So back to the nuts and bolts of the process itself then. So, you know, a really good question here. And if, by the way, if anyone actually asked these questions and logged in, please raise a hand, or if you wanted to ask them yourself, feel free to do so. But so rather this was interactive, and perhaps we'll give this one over to Rich as well. So, how do I go about selecting the CMMC level that is right for my organization for now and in the future? Sorry, Rich, curveball for you.
Okay. So basically, it's determined by the data that you have access to. So if you have access to FCI or federal contract information, then that would be level 1 and 2. If you have access to FCI and CUI, meaning control unclassified information, then you do level 3, or at least you start at level 3 at a minimum.
Yes.
Now, that being said, you still need, although you're level 3, you will need to satisfy levels 1 and 2. It's cumulative.
Yes.
So you need to comply with all 3.
Yes. Yes. So you've answered 2 questions in one, actually. So there's a question: if I need level 3, do I only need to meet the requirements of level 3? No. Cumulative, you have to pass 1 and 2 as well. So thank you for that perfect answer. So actually, the next question was one of mine, because I'm always looking for a way to get to done quicker. So is there an exceptions process, and is there a provisional kind of way to pass without passing the whole thing up front?
So with the, and we've asked similar questions in the training, just because we know there's going to be a bottleneck. And I'm sure later on we'll get into the numbers that they plan to roll out. But basically, exceptions, not really. It's straightforward and clear, and DoD is also putting a lot of pressure on the CMMC board on what they want, how they want it. So I think the impression I got is DoD learned the lesson that NIST and self-assessment just wasn't the right way to go. So now they're really putting stringent requirements on the CMMC audits. The auditors, there is a strict methodology and approach, what we can do, how we can do things. So with that being said, there's no exceptions that have been mentioned, and I don't think there will be any exceptions.
Okay. But just while we're on the training, Steve has asked a question in the chat. So any indication on when those not chosen for the provisional assessors will be trained? I don't think we have that intel, do we?
So there are 3 training courses. So one is the first 25 that already took place. The next 25 is going to be end of this month, and the next one is going to be, the next 25 is going to be in October.
But those names are already known, aren't they?
I think so. There is I know the 2, well, there's 2 waiting lists for the next 2 ones. So most likely the ones that received it will probably attend. I'm not expecting anyone to jump off, but
there is no
waiting list
schedule of who's next on the list and when they're going to get trained. Sorry, Steve, we just don't have that.
But this year, just to finish that, this year there will be no more training. So the next ones will then come next year.
Okay, that's a nugget of information there. That's really useful. So not until next year, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah, because the other thing that that CMMC is also running in parallel to is train the trainers. Because right now we actually received the training from the CMMC board and their directors and their members who put this all together. So in parallel to this, they are putting online training courses. They are also looking for companies that will be the trainers, and that is being done in process. That is being done. So right now, the next step would be for CMMC board to certify and get those companies that will be providing the training to get them on board, get them trained. And that's when I believe the next training will happen next year.
All right, for some reason I've lost my camera, so I'm just fighting with that at the moment. Rich, I've got another one for you, and it's, I'm guessing the answer is going to be something like, how long is a piece of string, but how long does CMMC certification take?
Okay, so that depends on your level of maturity. Many companies in the past have used that spreadsheet checklist approach, meaning yes, no, maybe, I plan to. No longer can you do that. You need to have the measures in place and demonstrate a level of maturity. So it can take as little as 3 months. It can take as long as 9 months, but it depends on your level of maturity. Now, let's assume someone had truly complied with NIST 171, meaning DFARS, right? They will be on the shorter timeline because they will now just need to address 20 additional requirements. So, like I said, it depends on the level of maturity. Now, the actual assessment, let's say everything is in order. And this is something Dasha can probably add to as one of the assessors, but your level of organization will determine how long that assessor takes to gather and document the information needed on her part, his or her part. So if you are not prepared and you do not have your package, your CMMC package put together in the right format, you can take, let's say, a week or 10 days to complete that audit, the actual audit. Versus if you are organized and you have your assessment package or CMMC package ready, then it will take a shorter time. Dasha, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with what you said. But also from a methodology and administrative perspective, the CMMC expects or wants or needs to have 4 different phases that will be in this whole process. So the first phase is the planning phase, which will be done with pretty much the initial scope, getting the project plan together. And this is also one of the requirements that CMMC has. It's no longer going to be this, yeah, we're going to do an assessment, but you need to have and submit a proper project plan. You need to have the entire scope well defined. You need to do change control as things happen. And all this is going to happen in phase 1. So even way before the audit starts. And then phase 2 is going to be the actual assessment on site, which is what you mentioned, Rich. And that, you know, can take a few days, can take weeks. It really depends on how big the company is, how well they have defined their documents, how well it's organized. And then the phase 3 will be the actual report that will be then written by the assessors and then QA review by the PAO companies. And then from there, it goes to phase 4, which is submission to the CMMC board. And from there, they will review and then assign the certification level. So the whole process itself, including the assessment, is going to be a long process. And I think this is where a lot of people did not expect. They just assumed it's going to be a regular assessment, like before you show up, you do something, you collect evidence, you write the report, and you're out the door. It's a lot more, it's a lot bigger cycle than this 800.
So, okay, that is a surprise, certainly for me, and I guess for a lot of folks on the call, just how involved and how detailed that is, and the kind of 3 to 9 months is, as you say, versus a NIST or any other assessment. That's sounds like a long time. So, okay, that's really useful to know. If a company is a company certification the same as the CMMC AB registered provider organization? If not, what's the difference?
So, all right, and this is where I need to actually take my cheat sheet because it is it is complicated, and there are several different areas. So let me just open this up. So we've got, so you got so basically registered provider organizations. Those could be like MSSPs, for example. They are registering their services that they are CMMC compliant to some level. So for example, a data center that has that is hosting GovCloud or has Office 365 that is DFARS certified, and also they go after the CMMC requirement, you can basically use those provider organizations to use their services. And basically during the assessment, you will just have to show that they are compliant, or you will get from them a certificate that they are compliant, that their services are. So basically it makes your scope smaller. It's still your third party, your service provider is still in scope, but since they're certified, they will just provide the certification, and you will be okay on that side, whatever services you have with them. So that's the provider. Company certifications, that's the C3PAO. That is different. Those are the companies that actually have the assessors. And those are the companies that review the assessments from the assessors and submit them to the CMMC board to then have it adjudicated and issue the certificate. So basically, through CPAO, companies are the kind of the QA and the official in-betweener between the assessors and the CMMC board. Does that answer the question?
That was from Claire.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Perfect. Claire's got another one. Will an assessor certification be required to assist level 1 companies?
Yes.
Is that assist or assess level 1 companies?
Assess.
Both.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, it's straightforward. So you can do the unofficial consulting to companies, as in, hey, let us walk you through and do kind of an internal assessment on where you are. That you can do without the level 1 or assessor certification. There will be a registered practitioner group and certification. You can already find that on the CMMC AB website. They are taking candidates already. So those will not be assessors, but those will be practitioners, and those could be staff from the registered provider organization or supporting staff within different companies or consulting companies, but not the ones that can do the official assessment. So there's kind of the step where I would say the first one is the registered practitioner. You will have to go through some training that will be probably online, maybe some classroom, I don't know yet. They haven't quite figured that out yet. And then there's the assessors, and there's going to be the C3PAO, and then the CMMC board.
Awesome. Is that good, Claire?
Well, it seems like everything that I've seen with the CMMC and companies that I've talked with, nobody wants to deal with the level 1s. You know, their business is focused on level 2s and 3s. And it seems like the level 1s are, you know, they're necessary, but nobody is interested in them. And you also have to look at the cost. Mm-hmm. These are a lot of vendors and suppliers that can be very small. And when you're talking about, you know, it's got to be a certified assessor, you know, they're going to have a certified auditor. Mm-hmm. Cost is increasing. And, you know, while DOD keeps saying we want to keep it inexpensive because we know there's going to be a huge number of level ones, it's like they're being left behind.
Yeah.
And I just think that, the CMMCAB should really be thinking more about how a level one can do this sufficiently. I mean, it's 17 requirements, but also looking at the cost. And I think all of these requirements, you just keep adding them on and the price keeps going up, and you're going to have a lot of people who are just going to say it's not worth it.
Yeah, we have a similar observation just going through the process of working with the board and trying to register the company and Dasha as an assessor. I'm not.
But I would like to add something to it. Let's not forget, this is all based on NIST 800-171. The CMMC has added 20 different controls to it to make it better or improve it or whatever you call it. But all defense suppliers and providers have to be or should have been NIST 800-171 compliant 3 years ago. So technically, we're not really speaking here doing anything from the beginning. The companies that have been working with the DoD should have done and should have been NIST compliant. Now it's really about 20 controls. And if you're not level 5, at level 5, you're going to have to meet those 20 controls. But level 1, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 in there. So it's not such a big delta that companies will be looking at. Now, if you, and that was made clear in the training as well, if companies just kind of really gone through it over the last 3 years and said, yeah, we're kind of okay, we meet the checkbox, but not really making sure that they really are NIST compliant, then yes. And that's where the problem will come in, and that's where the bottleneck will be. And that's also where the delays will come in, where companies realize that, oh my God, we really have to do something.
Right. So that's one of the problems that CMMC, I guess, was really trying to address, which was those folks that said they were ticking all the boxes and weren't necessarily or should not have been ticking all the boxes. So, yeah, I mean, bear in mind, it's, the national interest at heart. So, yes, it's harder on those small companies, and maybe more so if they perhaps hadn't got to the level of security that they should have done. So,
can I just follow on?
Yeah.
So you're saying that all level ones should have completed their NIST 800-171, correct?
Yep. I mean, they're doing business with the government, so in that case, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That's okay. So yeah, let's keep the questions. This we love the interactive part of this. So anything else, Claire? Just jump in. Norman, welcome, Norman. Good question. Will there be a fast track path if there is an emergency? That kind of goes to the exception question a little earlier on, and then I'll ask the next question after because it's not particularly related. But is there a fast track for a company that needs to get their certification? My guess is that would be at the behest of the DoD agency. Could be, never say never, but I don't know. Dasha or Rich, over to you.
Well, fast track, if it comes to certification, well, I'm sure the CMMC board will work as quickly as possible, but they issue the certification. So on them, I don't think it's going to take too long to issue that once they receive the evidence. And there are strict guidelines on how many days after an assessor has completed the work, how many days the company has to submit it to the board, and how many days they have to review it and issue a certificate. So there's deadlines. So that's not going to be the process, or that's not going to be the problem. The problem I see is going to be the company actually meeting the requirements, remediating and implementing the gaps if there are any that were found during the assessment. And as far as fast track, it's at the very beginning, it comes down to reaching out to a C3PAO company and having them prioritize when and how quickly they're going to do an assessment for you, with you.
Right.
Well, DoD has nothing to do with this in here. It's really about the company making the first step and getting a company in to do the assessment.
Yeah. So I read the question to be, oh my God, we're bidding on this opportunity. That P-win is high. Oh, we forgot to get our CMMC assessment. How do we do that quickly? Then, yeah.
So it goes down to reach out to a C3PAO company, get them to do it as quickly as possible. But then the fast track part really depends on the company, how quickly they have their stuff together.
Yeah, their kind of readiness, and then also once that assessment is done, then there is a standard process within the CMMC body that then deals with that to determine their success or not. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Another one from Norman. Can a firm or person have their certification pulled or revoked?
Yes, at any time. It's about, so the assessors themselves have specific methodologies and tools that they have to use. Their work will be reviewed. The CMMC board sees those. If there's any quality issues, then the assessors will be will have a talk. If they are in not good standing, they will not be able to make any assessments. And if they do not improve, then yeah, certificate can be pulled.
Ashley, what's the recertification for people or for assessors and companies? Is it every 2 years, 3 years?
Every 3 years for the companies. Assessors, good question. I don't know yet because there's different levels of certifications. So right now they're getting us ready for level 1. Then once you have certain amount of certifications done, or sorry, assessments done as an assessor, then you can go to level 2, and then you can go to level 3 and assess those. So if you're a level 3 assessor, which is where they're putting us through, you can do 1, 2, and 3, but you will not be able to do 4 and 5. So 4 and 5 assessors will have a lot more stringent requirements, including the company having facility clearance and all of that good stuff. So
very good, very good. Okay, so let's get on to the more technical aspects of the process then. So great question here. How should I go about evaluating my business relationships with subcontractors, since this now has them in scope?
Basically, they will subcontractors will need the CMMC certification.
Right.
So that will be passed down by the primes to their subco and subco to subco. Right now, there is the DoD has all the documentation that is out for public already on their website. So my recommendation would be just to get your subcontractors or your suppliers to take a look at it and start getting into the process.
Mm-hmm.
They need the information. Yes, there will be probably some tweaks done as the DoD comes back with some refinement, but overall the majority requirements are there. So companies just need to get on with it.
Right. So it's communication, project management, and yeah, just doing.
And
okay.
it's like third party also in the financial world, and also similar to DoD that was with NIST 800. And Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, or primes already requested from subcos to be NIST 800 compliant. They requested evidence. They got. My recommendation is really get started on it. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to be quite a long time.
Yeah, for sure. Great counsel. So the next question echoes for me back to PCI and the kind of card processing environment. So How do I define my system boundaries to minimize the threat surface? So I guess if we used PCI as an example where, you know, only the card processing environment is in scope, does the CMMC work the same? Is it just the CUI data and the systems that host that and transmit that in scope, or is the whole enterprise in scope?
No, a good question. So segmentation comes into play here as well. But let's make sure that, I mean, companies need to understand that there's FCI, which is Federal Contract Information, and then there's CUI. Both are in scope. So anyone that has FCI data needs to be level 1 or level 2 certified. Okay. Once you have CUI data, then it's level 3 and 4 and 5, depending on what project or contract you're working on.
Right.
So what companies may do, or what some companies may have done, is they have FCI data in a complete separate segment than CUI data. They might have it all combined, and then their entire corporate infrastructure separate. So segmenting it out, definitely, that limits the scope or makes it smaller. But it depends how the company have set it up. So for example, if they have one system for one network segment for FCI and a network segment for CUI, and they are applying for level 3, then basically we would have to audit 2 systems. So it still would be one audit, but from an assessment perspective, we still would have to do one for FCI and one for CUI.
That's a surprise. Okay. Okay, that's good to know. Dasha and Rich, as our panelists, what haven't we mentioned yet? What haven't we discussed? What other tidbits can you share with us? Rich, I'll start with you. Is there anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, one thing I would like to add, you know, extending on the discussion on scope. You know, we mentioned FCI and CUI data. Now, there's something called ITAR data, and ITAR data automatically is CUI data, and that puts you at a level 3. So although there's a different regulatory body that ITAR is subject to, it crosses over into, you know, CMMC. So does AIR, right? So, you know, scoping is critical when planning your project, because you cannot ignore that you have ITAR data, because right, although ITAR data does not come under the DoD per se, it is still CUI data. And then, of course, identifying what is CUI and being able to then apply to where it is stored, where it's transmitted, who has access to it. And those things are important. So, you know, at the very beginning, scoping is important, and knowing what kind of data you have access to and need to protect and thus document.
I think that was very well said. And I think one of the reasons that the CMMC board is requesting this planning phase to start out with before you go the assessment, because that really goes on the scoping side. That's where really you create the scope, the project plan, the all of the, you know, everything that you need to do that's happening in that phase. So to your point, this is really critical, and that's going to really dictate how well the company, how quickly the company can be certified, what their scope is, and what kind of evidence they need to submit.
Great. So I've got a question. So as a consulting firm, we focus very much on not just we focus on people, process, and technology. So now this is an assessment that just from a very top level view, CMMC, what's the split between people, processes, and technology? Is it kind of a third each, or is this predominantly a technology related framework, or what do you think?
It's a mix of both. So CMMC specifically calls it a practice and processes. And they have within each one of the levels and each one of the requirements, they split it out into a practice, as in what is being done, and then the processes associated with it, to show that there's actually a maturity in here. This is CMMC is a maturity assessment. So in some areas, for example, on level 1, it's going to be straightforward. You have to do things. They might not be necessarily, or there's not the requirement for processes to be in place. That starts coming into play on level 2, where it needs to be documented. You need to have it well defined. You have to have the responsibilities in place. So basically every single one of the requirements, I've got it here, I can pull one up. We've got requirements that have, I think for example, personal security. You've got on level 2 or 3, you've got, let's say, 6 requirements on the practices on what needs to be done, and then several requirements on the processes. So it's always a mix. And they've on the training, they provided really good slides that show out what exactly, how many processes and how many practices are for each one of the requirements, how it fits in. So yeah, it's a combination of both.
Okay, so it's great. Claire's asked.
So, let me just give an example, because I just pulled it up here. So maintenance, for example, on level 1, there is 0 practices and 0 processes needed. On level 2, for maintenance, you got 4 practices on what needs to be done and 2 specific processes, how it needs to be done. So that kind of goes, that's the methodology and approach that they've done for CMMC.
Okay, so this isn't one of those where you can just say, okay, I've encrypted all of my data at rest and in transit, and I've trained all my people, can I go now? It's a lot more detailed than that.
No, and the assessors actually have a complete list of what we need to look at. So for example, identification, authentication. Level 1, there's 2 practices that need to be followed. And for each one of those practices, we've got the evidence that we need to look at. What do we have to, what needs to be documented, how it needs to be documented. On level 2, there's 5 additional practices, there's 2 processes, and we really, as assessors, get the guidelines of, we need to collect this, we need to view this, we need to do this, and we have to stick with it. If we don't, and we can lose our assessor license, and the company will not be certified if we take a shortcut. So it is very stringent. The forms that we have gotten, or the tools to actually document the assessment and what we receive is very, very detailed as well. So if it's not there, it's not there. We can't mark it as it's
right
there for no reason.
So this thing has real teeth, right? So unlike DFARS, I mean, this thing really, they're taking this one seriously.
Yes, they are. Robert, one thing I wanted to add to what Dasha said, you know, there's a technology part. So you can purchase tools, but you cannot document your way into CMMC compliance or buy your way in, because let us say you had the policies, you have all the technology, but you know, you still now need to demonstrate the maturity. How does those processes work? Do they work as intended? What is the proof? That's where the maturity comes in. So you cannot do it overnight. You cannot buy the stuff this week, put it into place, and then say I'm ready, because you will not be able to demonstrate maturity. So, you know, it comes back to that entire thing of, is there a fast track? No. You need to go through those processes, and the auditors will check to see, not only, like I said, do you have it, but does it work as intended? What are the metrics? Show us the numbers. It's everything is verified and validated.
So I haven't seen anything like that since Sarbanes-Oxley, and the evidence aspect of gaining that accreditation. So we're saying that evidence is required. It's not just about ticking boxes here. It's either screenshots or practices. Can evidence be witnessed as actually happening in real time? Is that one of the requirements? So, for example, not and this is totally off the top of my head, but say, for example, you needed a particular process or practice to be operational to achieve a tick in that particular box. Would it be okay for the assessor to have witnessed that process to sign it off as being okay, or does every single thing need some evidence?
In some extent, we can sign it off if we observe it, but everything else then needs to be in place as well. So, for example, if there's a control, and for that particular control we need to review 6 different things, then if we observe one and the 5 others, we have the evidence, we take screenshots or we record a session or something, or there's a policy around it that we can show, then it's okay. Yeah, there's some nuances where we can do it, but in general, evidence is key.
Rob, I think that brings up a good point, but there's a difference between compliance and maturity.
Mm-hmm.
Compliance, sure, I checked all the boxes and got the controls in place. Maturity shows that not only have I done that, but I do that all the time for a long time.
Yeah, it's been ongoing. I didn't just start this up just for this exercise.
Which is,
yeah.
So that's another thing is companies not having done or having it in place and now starting to scramble. It's like, oh, I want to have my assessment in a month. Well, you know, for level 1, maybe not so much of a problem, but level 2, it's going to become a problem very quickly.
So we've seen in the past the deployment of frameworks with a drop dead date, and then we've seen, oh, well, that was a bit difficult. And in this particular case, we've got the nation's interests are at heart. So my worry here is that vendors, the majority of vendors will not be able to get the assessed to the level that they need to bid on certain contracts. What's the risk that certain projects will not be fulfilled on time? And this is a purely hypothetical question and no one knows the answer, but I'm just thinking, is there a risk that there will be delay to projects purely because there is so much to do with CMMC and perhaps more than the client, the DoD themselves are expecting?
Rich, do you want to start with that? Give your opinion. I've got some numbers, so I want to share those later on.
I wouldn't comment on that because that is an unknown, and those answers are better asked of the board rather than us.
It was a hypothetical. It's just the way my mind works. I'm sorry.
So my opinion on that is, I think, and I hope the DoD and the board have kind of put some thoughts into this. I mean, CMMC has not, DoD started working on CMMC 3 years ago. So it's not something that just appeared out of nowhere without any thoughts and processes. And I know that they have a 5-year rollout for CMMC. So right now, I can share some info here on the numbers.
So the reason, the reason for that is some contracts are 5 years in duration. So if they've just been awarded, I guess there's no way that they can retrospectively enforce CMMC. It's just when that project is rebid or recompeted, then is that have to be CMMC compliant.
Robert, one thing to add to that is, we haven't mentioned it as yet on this call, but DFARS has not gone away.
Right.
And in the beginning, they will coexist. So it is quite possible for somebody to be subject to DFARS, especially in the first year or 2 of CMMC, or to be subject to both, depending on when that contract was awarded or when it comes up for review. So DFARS still needs to be adhered to, right, in some cases. And then as we come up to that 5, it's like a sliding scale. So more of CMMC, less of DFARS until DFARS goes away. But for now, they will coexist.
Great.
So there's also that element that needs to be considered.
Great point. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's yeah, really very useful. Okay, Dasha, were you going to wrap up? We've got 5 minutes left. What did you notice that we haven't covered?
So just couple numbers. So the CMMC board knows that there's around 300,000 companies that need to be certified over the next 5 years.
Wow.
So that's the goal. For next year, for fiscal year 21, there will be, the DoD is planning to award 15 prime contracts with 15 prime contracts. And fiscal year 22 will be 75, then 250, 479, 479. So basically it's a 5-year rollout. And as far as what DoD is expecting, just for fiscal year 21, level 1, 899 companies that will need to have level 1. Level 2, 149. Level 3, 452. And level 4 and 5, 0 right now for next year. So that's going to be total of 1,500 companies that need CMMC, some kind of CMMC compliance level within fiscal year 2021. And that's really just 0.5% of the 300,000. So there is a lot of companies that will need to get sorted out and need to be compliant. And this, by the way, is, I know this is DoD, but then eventually this will all go into NATO partners that work with the DoD. So we're not just looking at US companies, but also companies overseas that are affiliated or supply services to the DoD that will apply to them as well.
Good. That's good news.
And basically, starting fiscal year 2016, the goal is every single contract that will go out will have CMMC requirements in place. That's the end goal.
Okay, so just to confirm, the fiscal year starts in October.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we have a couple of minutes left. Any more? I've been answering questions, or we've been answering questions in the chat. Anyone else have any last minute questions before we bid you a good afternoon? No? Okay. So that just leaves me to sincerely thank everyone for joining. I hope you found that as useful as I did, because I learned some things today and I thought I was quite good at this. Thank you, Rich, for being our panelist. That very much appreciated. Please stay on at the end. I would like to have a quick chat with you if that's okay. And to Dasha for the insight and sharing. As I say, this was timely. You've been on the course this week, and I think there were some real nuggets in there. That was fantastic. For the guys at Stealth, thank you for joining and for putting this on and the support. Other than that, right on time. Thank you all again for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.